Today, we replace a failed Meross switch with a Kasa smart switch. All wiring and internet connection details will be explained. Near the end, we'll demonstrate a simple wiring trick. This trick makes switch connections simpler and allows for an easier fit in small outlet boxes. Hello everyone, this is Rick with Cybernetics. The first thing we'll do is a little comparison one-on-one with the Meross and Kasa smart switches. On this Amazon page, you can see the price of the Meross switch is $14.99. Significant thing to keep in mind is it's only rated for 4 amps. If we pop over here to the Kasa smart switch, we can see it also is $14.99 presently, and its current rating is 15 amps. So significantly higher current rating on the Kasa smart switch. The next thing I wanted to note is the compatibility of each of the smart switches with the smart speaker systems. And if you notice on the Kasa web page for the switch, it only lists Alexa and Google Assistant. Now there's a lot of information about how to make it compatible with Siri out on the web. You can research that. But if you come over here to Meross, you can see immediately on their switches Apple HomeKit, Alexa, Hey Google Assistant, and SmartThings are all listed as compatible. In this next section, we'll get into the wiring of the switches. I will tell you, I'm not an electrician. My grandfather was an electrician, and I started learning about wiring circuits when I was 8 years old. He had some very strict opinions about how to do things properly. I'll share some of those. There are some debates within the electrician community as to how to do things. I will tell you what my grandfather said, and then you can make up your own mind. But then again, I am not an electrician. What we're going to do is start off first with wire nuts. Now these are the wire nuts that typically come with your smart switch. And I don't like these wire nuts because they don't have wings on the edges. A wing wired nut is much easier to twist to make a solid connection. The other thing to consider for wire nuts is the sizing of the wire nuts. Much like a current rating on a gauge of wire, wire nuts are also rated for the number of wires that they can support. So for instance, if you look at this red wire nut on this package here, it's a minimum of 2 14-gauge wires and a maximum of 5 12-gauge wires. And this yellow wire nut is a minimum of 2 18-gauge and a maximum of 3 number 12-gauge. So you have to determine the capacity of the wire nut, much like you determine the capacity of a wire. You can't just pick up any wire nut and start using it. And again, I like the winged ones better. We can kind of go over the tools. Here are the main tools that I use when doing electrical work. A set of lineman's pliers. These are going to be good because if you do twist any wires or you have to pull a wire through, you're going to want something with some teeth on it, and it's heavy duty. This was a cheap one, but it does get the job done. Pair of needle nose for getting into tight spaces. Pair of side cuts for cutting wires. You definitely want one of these wire strippers that has the gauge ratings on the side so you can determine, because you don't want to nick the wires. Even though you can use this to trim the insulation, you don't want to do that. You want to use something that actually has the gauges marked. And this is ideal for checking the power. You can plug it into a receptacle, or you can just touch a wire and determine whether there's power or not on the wire. At the minimum, I would recommend a complement of tools as pictured here. The next thing to talk about is stripping wires. And typically when you're combining wires together, you want to strip between 3/4 and a 1/2 inch, probably closer to 3/4. Once you strip the wires And there is a big debate in the electrician community as to whether to twist these wires before you put the wire nuts on, or to just let the wire nut do its job and let the wire nut twist them. My grandfather would say definitely do not twist the wires, and the main reason that he said don't twist the wires is because when you go to twist these wires and you start off twisting these, what's invariably going to happen is you're going to wind up nicking these wires. So when you start cranking on these wires and twisting them, you're going to nick and scrape and damage the wires. And he did not believe that was a good idea. Now, part of the problem that people have with wire nuts is because they don't, one, have enough wire to begin with. They're not even at the end. That's key. You have to have these even when you go to tighten them up. Another thing is they don't use the appropriate wire nut with wings. So what we're going to do is twist this, and they don't twist it enough. So I mean, you really, really have to crank this, and you'll know you've cranked it enough once you get it in there if the wires themselves start twisting. So you can see here as I'm twisting these wires together, the wires are wrapping around themselves. So if you don't see some physical action like that, and that's solid. And I did one here earlier, I just wanted to pull the wire nut off for you just to show you. You can see how well that wasn't twisted together. That was all done with just the wire nut. So if you do it properly, you won't have any nicks on the wires, you won't chew the wires up, and you will get a nice twist and a good solid connection. The exception to keeping the wires even is when you are using stranded wire, and this isn't stripped long enough, but I just want to show this for demonstration. If you were going to twist these together, you always start the stranded wire a little bit ahead of the solid wire. And the reason is because as you twist the nut, this stranded wire has a tendency to slide down. So if you start them even, what's going to happen is your stranded wire is going to be below and it's not going to make a good connection. Personally, I don't like twisting stranded wire with wire nuts. There's a method we talked about showing you a neat little trick to make your connections easier, and we'll demonstrate that when we go to put the switch physically in. The next phase of this, we're going to do the installation, both the physical installation and then the software configuration on the network. What you want to do always is make sure you check for power. So you can see there's power here, and this is the other hot wire which has no power on it. So this is considered to be your line voltage, and this is considered to be your load. Sometimes the switches are particular about wiring it specifically to the line and load. As you can see on this switch here, I can get it, there we go, line load, but they're not designated one or the other. So on this particular switch, you can wire it either way, but on some of them you have to make sure that you do the line and load correctly. So we supposedly just switched off the power, and sure enough, there is no power in the box. Another safety note is you want to make sure you tell everyone in the house that you're working on the electric and that no one else is going to mess with the panel, because you would hate for someone to turn on the circuit breaker in the middle of you working on an electrical outlet. So the trick that I promised you earlier in the video isn't so much a trick as it is an easy installation method. In Europe, it's infrequent, or probably mostly never, that they use wire nuts like this for installations. They just don't do it. And the reason they don't do it is because they want things to be consistent and reliable. what I have here that I'm going to show you is something called Wago. And I have a whole box of these that I bought for my home improvement. They look like this. And what's neat about these is you lift up the little levers on them. So the lever lifts up on it. And the wire just slides right into the end of it. And then once the wire slides in, all you have to do is just clamp it down. And then on the back side, you can check to make sure that the wire is all the way into the connection. So that's not so much a trick, I guess, as it is just an easy way to install things. And my preferred method, if you're going to use stranded wire on something, is to use these. I would normally only use one that holds two wires because we're only connecting two wires at a time, but I have a whole box of these and it just doesn't make sense because they're going to just sit on a shelf and probably never get used. So this is a good opportunity to go ahead and use these. So you open them up like that. You can see that the lever is open. What we're going to do is just stick the wire, seat the wire all the way into it and close it down. And that's snug, and you can see the wire is all the way seated into the clamp. Do the same thing for circuit coming out of the wall. And now that's connected. And that's all there is to it. That simple. No twisting of wire nuts. All right, so all of those are connected. You download the Kasa Smart app from your iOS or Android Play Store. You'll hit the plus to add, and you'll say device down here at the bottom. And we want to add a smart switch. And in this case, it's the HS200. So do you have an orange and green blinking light? So let's look at this and see. Yes, we do. That is great news. And it says, do you want to connect? So on the device, phone will say connect. I finally did connect to the network. Sometimes that's a little bit of a hiccup with these smart switches. You just have to finesse it a little bit. Call that security 1 because it's tied into our security light and camera. Then we'll click next, choose an icon, press save. You've configured your smart switch. And there's security 1 is listed on the app. Connect your switch. So you have to download their skill. Sign in to allow Amazon Alexa to control your TP-Link devices. Okay, so we logged in to allow Alexa to control the TP-Link devices. The accounts have been linked. The skill has been enabled. Alexa, turn off security 1. Alexa, turn on security 1. Okay, with a little finagling, security camera is back. Next thing we'll do is we'll tape up everything and install it back in the box. All right, we're going to temporarily turn off the power because we're pushing everything back in the box just as an extra safety precaution. And the security camera that is controlled by the switch is presently on. So what we'll do is we'll move back over to the Kasa app. Alexa, turn off security 1. Now you can see she's turned off the switch and the light on the switch has illuminated. We'll go back over to the camera, and the camera is no longer there because the switch has been turned off. This concludes our video demonstration of the Kasa HS200 configuration and installation. Please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. This supports our efforts to help others with technology, and have a great and wonderful automation day.